Hi, and welcome to another episode of The Lamp in the Library. I'm Graeme.
I'm Kim.
And even though it's only September, we are getting into the Halloween spirit early because that's what we do. As soon as the temperature drops just a little bit, we definitely embrace the spookiness of the season. So today we're going to be talking about The Haunting of Hill House by Shirley Jackson, a classic.
So just to go over a really brief plot synopsis for those who have not read the book, but without giving any spoilers away, because we want to just allow this to be a video that can pique people's interest who haven't read the book, or for those who have, maybe just to share some thoughts we have on the novel. But the plot is that there is a house, and it is said to be haunted. And what haunted means, we don't totally know. Then there is this character who is a professor and a researcher of psychic events, and he decides to rent the house, and he wants to just observe and see if he can prove that haunting and psychic phenomenon can exist. He makes a list of people that he wants to come and stay at the house with him so that together they can do research. Everyone on the list backs out except for two women, Eleanor and Theodora, who goes by Theo, and Eleanor, the short form Nell. And they were chosen because they both in their past had shown that they'd had some sort of relationship with psychic phenomenon, so he brings them there because he thinks it might awaken the house more. The other character brought in is the person who's going to be the heir of the house when his aunt passes away. He's sort of there to make sure that the shenanigans don't get too out of control, just to sort of look after the house, although he's a bit of a cad and not necessarily overly concerned with that. And that's just a really sort of brief overview of it. They come, they stay at the house, and then haunting occurs, or does it?
So this is a pretty classic setup for a haunted house narrative, whether you've seen it many times in movies and books. And part of that is because The Haunting of Hill House, written in the 50s, it really set the template for this kind of story going forward, but it is a classic setup. So what is it that sets this particular book apart from the many, many imitators and many, many other, books in this haunted house genre?
Yeah, I have to admit that I don't think I've ever actually read another novel that deals with a haunted house. If I have, I don't remember it. But what I think is the strengths of this book are its ambiguity. You're never entirely sure what's going on. It doesn't give you any answers in the end, and I think that is a really big strength of the book. I think it's the way it slowly ramps up the tension and the suspense, which then really invites the reader into the haunting, is a huge strength of the work as well. And then it's the characters. It's a really interesting character study because there's points where you are not sure what the truth is with these characters, because they have a way of playing. The way they talk to each other is very playful sometimes, but then can get really edgy. There's some mistrust, there's some lying that goes on, so you're left not knowing things. And I think it's that psychological drama is a huge part of what makes it a classic, and something that maybe is beyond what you think of as the tropes of a haunted house narrative. And lastly, I think tying into the ambiguity as well is the backstory of the house is really fascinating, but it also has mystery. Like, it never gives you full answers there as well, and that's really intriguing, but that's part of what I loved about it too. Like, I know there's now a Netflix story that supposedly is like sort of a reimagining with some of the backstory of that, and like, I'm not interested in that because I love the way she set it up. I love just the bits of knowledge you have from it and how that sort of like buries its way into your mind as you're reading.
Yeah, I agree. I think the subtlety and the ambiguity is really the strength. I mean, Shirley Jackson's an amazing writer, and that's part of it. I mean, it's a real work of genius to kind of evoke these feelings, and the atmosphere is so strong, but it is ambiguous. It's not like a lot of horror genre things. There's a monster, there's a creature, there's something that jumps at you, to scare you. But this is very subtle, and you're never really sure, as you say, if a character is telling the truth, and it's really interesting. And the two main characters, Theo and Eleonora, their relationship is very interesting, and what they bring to it. It's implied that Eleanor has had some kind of poltergeist phenomena in her past, while Theo, she has a kind of ESP. That's her supernatural gift that she brings to the table. So when Eleanor says something, it's implied that Theo knows if she's lying or not, and you're never really on firm ground with this story. You're never really sure. Is the house haunting the people in the house, or are the people in the house haunting the house? Like what's happening first, chicken or egg? And it's that kind of thing.
And that sort of like even goes back to the origin story really interestingly. Was it somehow built and just within itself in its building carry this energy, or was it just what the first family who inhabited it, that they somehow brought that into it? Like, it's just a really interesting which part is haunting which part, which is really fun within that.
And it's also fun where the backstory, how it integrates with the backstories of the characters who are in the house now throughout the narrative. That's really, really interesting interplay as well, and very subtly done.
I think one of the themes of the book is female relationships, and also just the repression of maybe like female emotions and just the expectations on their lives. You have that theme play out in the story of some of the people who lived in the house originally. You definitely have it play out with Eleanor herself before she was invited to the house. She was taking after her very ill mother until the mother passed away for most of her adult life. She didn't like her mother. She hates the sister she has. And then she has this really interesting relationship with Theo where sometimes it feels familial, but then it can really erupt into a tense relationship, which I guess is actually quite familial because a lot of people are like that with their family, but it's an interesting dynamic. And then you also have Theo's life, which it's very hinted at, but I think it's quite obvious that they're referring to Theo having a lesbian relationship in her life back home.
Yeah, and it's interesting that the phenomenon, the haunting phenomenon that occurs in the house, it's strongest when Theo and Eleanor are together. So there's a lot kind of roiling under the surface of that relationship, and it seems to find expression in the hauntings that take place in the house. So that's really interesting.
Yeah, I really enjoyed the book. I actually just had read it. I hadn't read it before, and you read it a few years ago. And one of the things I also really enjoyed about it is that it's more of a psychological suspense or thriller. I think sometimes when people hear the term horror or think of the horror genre, maybe they're expecting a lot of bloodshed or violent imagery within the book. And if you were going to it for that, then I think you would be disappointed because there's none of that. And if that's the sort of side of the genre that you like, then you may not like this book as much.
Yeah, absolutely. This is definitely more subtle, and but the subtlety in ambiguity is its greatest strength. It really is excellent at mastercraft in building atmosphere, and it's that atmosphere and that kind of lingering feeling of dread that it evokes that really sticks with you long after you've closed the book.
So Graeme, I mean, because we're talking about that the book can be ambiguous, and Shirley Jackson leaves it to the reader to decide or to relate to the book in its own way. In that, do you think that the house is haunted? Do you think Eleanor is haunted? What do you think? Or is it just all material?
I think, it's one of those books where you're not really sure by the end, but I think it's like a bit of both. I think Eleanor's backstory and her past and her psychological state that she brings to the house, it brings out something in the house. And there's something about the house that is very attractive to Eleanor. And I think they haunt each other.
I'm with you. Like, I think it's a little combination of the both. You could definitely end the book and just have a very materialistic worldview applied to it, that there is no haunting and it's all just people's consciousness and like things that they're doing. But I really lean more towards it. I actually think the book leans more towards like there is something going on that is a little unknown.
Yeah.
And you can't put your finger on what it is, but it, to me also, it's a collection of like there's some sort of energy of the house that enchants Eleanor, but Eleanor herself is bringing in her experience, her, psychology into it, and collectively it's something.
Yeah. I think one of the main themes of the book is the horror of loneliness.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just going to read you the very famous first paragraph in the book, which is echoed in the last paragraph of the book. Hill House, not sane, stood by itself against its hills, holding darkness within. It had stood so for 80 years and might stand for 80 more. Within, walls continued upright, bricks met neatly, floors were firm, and doors were sensibly shut. Silence lay steadily against the wood and stone of Hill House, and whatever walked there walked alone.
So, Graeme, do you believe a house or a building can be haunted?
I'm a bit of a skeptic when it comes to the supernatural, I'd say, but I think there's definitely a house can be haunted by the memory of what happened there, especially if people remember, some event, tragic or mysterious. That can definitely color the way they view the house. I also think, speaking of color, that the decor of a house can have a major influence on how people perceive said house and how they feel within it. Have you ever walked into a room that's so hideously decorated that you have to walk right out?
Haunted by decor.
How about you?
Oh, I think that a building or a space can definitely be haunted. Not necessarily from like the spirits of the undead, but just from the collective energy which it can hold, from people who have lived there, that somehow it's seeped into the walls, it's seeped into the floor, and you feel it when you enter it, even if you don't know anything about the building. Sometimes you'll enter a place and you're just like, there's just something negative about it, like it's almost like a wall you can feel, and you're just not comfortable there. But I think that can also happen in a space where the people still live there, and if they just have like a negative energy that they carry, you like enter their home or their apartment and you're just like, ooh, this place is kind of bringing me down. And it's just because it's carrying it, because I think that the energy can still just linger and exist.
Yeah, and even though I'm a skeptic, it's kind of like the phenomenon of, there's no atheists in a foxhole. People probably aren't going to sleep well if they're sleeping in a house that is allegedly haunted. Now, would you accept the offer that is offered the characters in this book? Would you spend time in a haunted house just to experience what the house offers?
Well, I don't think I would stay in a haunted house alone. One, because it would just be scarier, and you're just more likely to hear things that aren't there. But two, if something did happen, no one would believe you, and you'd just be left alone and people never believing your story, and that would be hard to carry with you. I don't think I would take on what they do of going alone with a group of people you don't know. I just feel like I would need someone that I trusted to be there with me. And I think it would depend on really what the story of the house was. Like, how dark was this story surrounding the house? And, because in my mind still, you want to respect what is there. And would I be disrespecting stepping where I shouldn't? What about you? Would you take it?
Yeah, I think I would with people. By myself, no. I used to work in a workplace that was allegedly haunted. Now, while I didn't see any ghosts in this workplace, when I had to close up, after hours by myself, it was scary. And one of the interesting things about this building is that there were female ghosts allegedly haunting the building, and they didn't like men, according to rumor. And so if I was closing up by myself, I would say, please don't show yourselves to me. I'm a nice guy. And I never did see a ghost. Now, is that because there were no ghosts, or because they knew that I was a nice guy and didn't deserve to be haunted? I guess I'll never know.
No way to truly know.
So we both really enjoyed The Haunting of House Hill by Shirley Jackson. Absolute classic of the genre. If you haven't read it yet, do yourself a favor. Get engrossed in the atmosphere. Now is the time of year to pick up this book.
Yeah, it was really fun. Thanks so much for watching The Lamp in the Library. If you like this video, please consider subscribing down below and giving us a thumbs up and clicking the bell notification so you always know when there's a new episode. Coming up, we will be sharing our Spooktober reads, what we're going to be reading during this season. And as we go, forward through to Halloween, we're just going to be sharing and marinating in this fun Halloween spirit.
Keep well.
Keep reading.
You will be well. It is